In today's My Hero Academia video, I show you our theory that Deku's mother, Inko Midoriya, had no other choice but to ask Dr. Ujiko to take Deku's quirk, which all for one then passed on to Shigaraki. I will show you how all this could be related to Deku's father, Hisashi Midoriya, and why this could be the reason why he may not be alive anymore. Also, only a small percentage of the people who watch our videos are actually subscribed, so if you end up liking this video, consider subscribing. Please enjoy this video, let's go! It all starts with the idea that Deku was actually born with the Decay quirk that Shigaraki uses today. The question is how it happened that Deku lost his quirk to All for One long before Dr. Ujiko told Deku that he was born without a quirk. The main point of this theory is to find a possible reason why Inko Midoriya had Deku's quirk purposely removed, and how all these characters and events mentioned converge irrefutably, so the conclusion makes perfect sense. The reason Inko Midoriya must have had can only be to protect Izuku and the people around him. The decision to remove Deku's quirk must have been necessary so that Deku could have a normal life. That in turn means that Inko's reason had something to do with Deku's original quirk and ultimately what happened in the past. We don't know much about Deku's past other than that he was a huge nerd when it comes to quirks and heroes, but that's about it. We don't know anything about what happened before Deku was 4 years old. Everything that happened before is a great mystery, even the identity of Deku's father, so we can assume that Deku's birth might have something to do why Deku's father is no longer at home. This is because we know that his father Hisashi Midoriya had a lot of time before Deku was born, as Inko had enough time to fall in love with him, marry him, and even get pregnant. But then Deku's father suddenly had to leave as he had to go abroad, and from that moment on had no more free time. This is very strange and just doesn't make sense, so the question arises as to whether there's perhaps more to it. Something Inko Midoriya could hide from Deku to protect him. And with that, we could assume that the disappearance of Deku's father might have something to do with the dangerous quirk Deku was born with and why his quirk had to be removed. But his father's not the only reason Deku's quirk could have been taken away, though it's still worth explaining, so let's talk about it real quick, and then I will show you another more general idea why Deku's quirk could have been removed. Note that even if Deku's father is still alive, it does not affect the theory that Deku's quirk was given to Shigaraki, as there are many other ways Inko might have seen Deku's quirk to be dangerous and therefore tried to remove his quirk. Apparently Deku's father has been working overseas for 16 years, which means he started to work right after Deku was born or maybe a little later. But there's something very strange about the whole thing with Deku's father, as we explained last week. Inko never talks about her husband, and Deku doesn't seem to have the slightest interest in him and doesn't even think about his father. The situation is much more extreme. There are literally no pictures of him in the whole apartment. Hisashi, who appears to be working abroad, has not had any contact with his family for 16 years. He does not call, he does not write letters, he does not send gifts, neither visits his family, nor tries any other form of contact or sign of life. No matter what job he has, this behavior is not normal and only leads to two possible conclusions. Either Deku's father Hisashi Midoriya is dead, or there is a reason why he cannot come back and avoids any contact. Last week we talked about one possible reason he's not returning, and there will be a follow-up video on this possibility next week. So subscribe with the notification bell activated if you don't want to miss this video. We do weekly My Hero Academia content. But today we are focusing on the possibility that Deku's father is simply no longer alive, which means that Deku's mother, Inko Midoriya, lied about Hisashi for some reason. The idea that Deku was born with the quirk Decay and simply made his father disappear with his quirk could be the reason why there are no pictures or any memories of his father at home, because Deku's mother Inko Midoriya tries to prevent Deku from remembering what happened in the past because she doesn't want Deku to know that he was responsible for his own father's death. That's why she could lie about that he's still alive, as she might be afraid to say he's dead because Deku might somehow remember what happened if he get the idea that his father is actually no longer alive. This could be the same reason why there's nothing about Hisashi Midoriya in the apartment, as Inko Midoriya may fear that Deku might remember his father. Things like clothes, personal items, pictures, and so on are completely missing. But maybe all of these things are missing not to prevent Deku from remembering his father, but maybe also because her old home was completely destroyed by Deku, which is why they now live in a 2 or 3 room block apartment with no physical memories of Hisashi Midoriya. This idea is really reminiscent of what happened to Shigaraki's family, which is why it's not difficult to believe that if Deku really had the Decay quirk, that it could be possible that he might have killed his father and destroyed their old home, and therefore is responsible why there are no longer any physical memories of his father Hisashi Midoriya. Obviously, such a tragic event will directly result in Deku's mother trying everything possible to make Deku forget about what happened, and at the same time trying to somehow allow him to live a normal life, which means that she had to somehow get him to lose his quirk. As already mentioned, this theory can still be correct, even if Deku's father really works abroad and thus is still alive. For example, imagine that Deku just destroyed their old house, or killed an animal, or something else happened so that Inko Midoriya concluded that Deku could not have a normal life while he was having such a dangerous quirk. So she started looking for a way to get rid of his quirk. And of course, the first thing anyone will do is to see a doctor who has studied quirks. So she visited every single doctor who specializes in researching quirks, and one day met Dr. Ujiko, who we know is in contact with All For One. After Deku's mother explained Dr. Ujiko the situation, he could have assured her that he knew how to remove Deku's quirk, and then told her to come back to him as soon as Deku gets older so that he can show Deku this fake X-ray image showing that he was apparently born with 2 joints on the little toe, suggesting that he was born without a quirk, which would automatically lead him to believe that he should have no hope or expectations of ever getting a quirk. Obviously, Dr. Ujiko would never tell Inko Midoriya that he works with All For One, so he told her that he can somehow remove Deku's quirk, for example with a small surgery. But in reality, All For One simply just has taken Deku's quirk, and then Dr. Ujiko just returned Deku to Inko a few hours later. As Deku got older and waited for his quirk to manifest, Inko decided to visit Dr. Ujiko, who then pretended he had never met Inko before. And then the whole X-ray thing happened that made Deku believe he was born without a quirk. Before my partner Yami continues with this video, please take a short moment to like this video. Thank you.
Dr. Ujiko could safely assume that Inko would never tell anyone about it, as she primarily wants to keep this a secret from Deku, as it's a pretty terrible thing to find out that he was responsible for his own father's death. And if Deku's father is still alive and has nothing to do with this, it is still uncomfortable if his son has been dreaming about a quirk the whole time and then finds out that his own mother is responsible for why he no longer has the quirk, even if it was necessary to remove the quirk. And there is always the possibility that after visiting Dr. Ujiko, All For One simply erased Inko's memory of everything that happened and led her to believe that Deku was really born without a quirk. This of course assumes that All For One has such a quirk with which he can manipulate thoughts, which is definitely not unlikely since he must has hundreds of quirks within him. This whole idea leads to the conclusion that All For One took Deku's quirk Decay and passed on to Tomura Shigaraki, then known as Tenku Shimura, the grandson of Nana Shimura, the 7th user of One For All and All Might Sensei. What a huge coincidence that the grandson of Nana Shimura, the 7th user of All For One, inherited such a devastating and dangerous quirk that within just a few minutes he suddenly destroys his entire family and then immediately found his way to All For One, who is the arch enemy of his grandmother Nana, so that All For One could then use Tomura Shigaraki to have a mental weapon against All Might. Sounds like it's too good to be true, especially considering that it was appeared that Tomura was born without a quirk. Since he was already too old to have an obvious quirk manifested, we know that people can have quirks without realizing it, as these quirks can be so specific that they have never come to any obvious use, and therefore people with such quirks have never believed that they were born with a quirk, like it was with the case with All For One's brother, who didn't know that he had a quirk all along. But Shigaraki's quirk Decay is not such a specific quirk, so that it is only shown under certain rare conditions, but is a very obvious quirk that Shigaraki should have shown before he was 5 years old. But it happened that Tomura suddenly manifested a very dangerous quirk called Decay. The sudden awakening of this quirk made him unable to control it properly, and so he destroyed his entire family. It's such a huge coincidence that you just have to ask yourself whether All For One gave Tomura this quirk on purpose so that he can make him his future vessel, and at the same time use him as a weapon against All Might, not only physically but also mentally, because Tomura Shigaraki is Nana Shimura's grandson after all. Nana Shimura had only one request to All Might and Gran Torino, that under no circumstances neither one of them should ever come into contact with the son or his family. But as bad as All For One is, he used exactly this against All Might to break him mentally. That's the kind of dirty game All For One is known to play. This theory is supported by the fact that All For One met Shigaraki as a young child and dropped him off at home just before his quirk awoke and eventually destroyed his entire family. When we learned the backstory of Shigaraki, we were told that he was 5 years old, and therefore this theory cannot fit with the timeline of My Hero Academia, since Shigaraki is 4 years older than Deku, which means that Shigaraki would have been 8 years old if one assumed that Deku lost his quirk when he visited Dr. Ujiko in the first chapter. But keep in mind that our theory here differs from other similar theories, as we say Deku lost his quirk much earlier, namely when he was around a year old, which then fits perfectly into the timeline where Shigaraki was 5 years old just before Shigaraki's quirk suddenly awoke. This would have a very bitter aftertaste for All For One, because he would be hit by a huge dose of karma for stealing Deku's quirk in order to ruin Shimura's family so that he can break All Might mentally, whereby he was the one directly responsible for creating the ultimate successor to One For All, who will one day defeat him for good. Not only that, it would create a direct link between Deku and Tomura Shigaraki and explain why Deku feels he has to help and save Shigaraki instead of defeating him. This theory suggests that Deku's quirk basically ruined Shigaraki's life, and thus he would realize that if he hadn't lost his quirk, Tomura would never have received the Decay quirk and therefore would never have become the person he is today. Deku could then have found himself in the same situation as Shigaraki, and perhaps could even see the possibility that Tomura could have been the one who would have received One For All instead of him, so that all happiness that Deku has today would be determined by the sadness that Shigaraki had to endure all of his life. This would be an extremely painful realization for Deku. This plot would show a very deep connection between Shigaraki and Deku and explain how small changes can affect our entire lives and how little control we actually have over our future when things or people outside determine our actions. It's a very poetic idea, and we would love to see this actually happen. What do you guys think of this theory? Please let us know your thoughts in the comments below. I would be happy if you could leave a like, and if you're new to our channel, feel free to subscribe with the notification bell activated. Otherwise, YouTube will not notify you. And we also do weekly My Hero Academia content. Thanks for watching. See you guys later. Yami out.